Toby is a tram engine. He has cow catchers and side plates and doesn't look like a steam engine at all. He takes freight cars from farms and villages to the main line and is cheerful to everyone he meets. He has a coach called Henrietta who has seen better days. "It's not fair at all," she grumbles, remembering that she used to be full and 9 cars would rattle behind her. Toby is always careful. The cars, buses, and trucks often have accidents. Toby hasn't had an accident for years, but the buses are crowded. A lady and a stout gentleman stood on Toby's platform. He was, of course, Sir Topham Hatt, but Toby didn't know this yet. "That's a tram engine, Stephen." Whoosh! They all scrambled into Henrietta. "Electric indeed, electric indeed," he snorted. He was proud of being a steam train. "What is your name?" asked Sir Topham Hatt. "Toby, sir." "Thank you, Toby, for a very nice ride." "Thank you, sir," said Toby. He felt better now. This gentleman, he thought, is a gentleman who knows how to speak to engines. The children came every day for 2 weeks. Sometimes they rode with the conductor, sometimes in empty cars. On the last day of all, the driver invited them into his cab. All were sorry when they had to go away. And Sir Topham Hatt and his family thanked everyone. "Come again soon," replied Toby. We will," called the children. The months passed. Toby had few cars and fewer passengers. "Our last day, Toby," said his driver one morning. "The manager says we must close tomorrow." That day, everyone wanted the chance of a last ride. The passengers joked and sang, but Toby and his driver wished they wouldn't. "Goodbye, Toby," said the passengers afterwards. "We're sorry your line is closing down." "So am I," said Toby. Nobody wants me, Toby thought, and went unhappily to sleep. Next morning, the shed was flung open, and old Toby woke with a start to see his driver waving a piece of paper at him. "Wake up, Toby," he shouted excitedly. "The mail has just arrived, and there is a letter for us from the stout gentleman. Maybe it's good news. He has cow catchers and side plates. I'll write to his superintendent at once." A few days later, Toby arrived. "You don't mind, do you, sir?" asked Toby. "The station master wanted to use her as a hen house, and that would never do." Toby made the silly cars behave even better than Thomas did. At first, Thomas was jealous, but he was so pleased when Toby rang his bell and frightened the policeman. They've been firm friends ever since. Toby and Henrietta were enjoying their new job on the island of Sodor, but they do look old-fashioned and did need new paint. James was very rude whenever he saw them. "Yuck! What dirty objects," he would say. At last, Toby lost patience. "James," he asked, "why are you red?" "Oh," said Toby innocently, "that's why you once needed bootlaces, to be ready, I suppose." James went redder than ever and snorted off. It was such an insult to be reminded of the time a bootlace had been used to mend a hole in his coaches. "Look here, Percy," exclaimed Toby. Whatever is that dirty object? That's James, didn't you know? It's James's shape, said Toby. But James is a splendid red engine, and you never see his paint dirty. Sir Topham Hatt met them. Well done, Percy and Toby. He turned to James. You're not fit to be seen. You must be cleaned at once. Toby shall have a new coat of paint. Please, sir, can Henrietta have one too? Oh, thank you, sir. She will be pleased. All James could do was watch Toby as he ran off happily with the news. Up and down the branch line. Sometimes he swept them aside. Sometimes they stuck fast. But at the cutting near the cottage, they could go no further. At long last, the rescue was complete. Percy took the tired workmen home. The engines made good time. There was no one to be seen. Thomas's heart sank. Suddenly, all the lights went on. What a marvelous sight awaited Mrs. Kindly. Well done, said Sir Topham Hatt. I'm really proud of you all. Mrs. Kindly especially thanked the smaller engines. Thomas and Toby are old friends, she said. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. Thomas the tank engine and his friends thought it was the best Christmas ever, and Mrs. Kindly could think of nowhere she would rather live than here with them on the island of Sodor. Hello, Thomas, whistled Percy. You look splendid. Oh, I don't know. I like my brown paint, said Toby. I've always been green. I wouldn't want to be any other color either. Percy said no more. He just grinned at Toby. Toby had to take Annie and Clarabelle. Poor Thomas, whispered Annie to Clarabelle. They were most upset. Thomas was grumpy in the shed that night. Toby thought it a great joke, but Percy was cross with Thomas for thinking he had made his paint dirty on purpose. Fancy allowing cows to break your train. They wouldn't dare do that to us. We'd show them. Old Toby was cross. You couldn't help it, Edward. They've never met cows. I have, and I know the trouble they are. Afraid? Rubbish, said Gordon. We didn't want the poor thing to hurt herself by running up against us. But sometimes the loads of stone were too heavy, and Percy had to fetch them. Percy found Toby at the quarry. I say, Toby. He collected his freight cars and started off, still fuming. When Thomas came back, Annie and Clarabelle told him how well Duck had managed. Thomas was so pleased to be home. Driver says I don't need him now. I'd never go without my driver, said Toby earnestly. I'd be frightened. You'd never dare. And Toby was still asleep. Silly stick in the muds, he chuckled. I'll show them. Driver said I could manage without him. I'll just go out and then I'll stop and wheesh. That'll make them jump. Cleaner had meddled with his controls. He just kept rolling along. You're in a lot of trouble, Thomas. You must go to the works and have your front mended. It will be a long job. Yes, sir. Diesels never gallivant off to breakfast in station masters' houses. Percy and Toby were worried. Thomas's recent accident had caused a great deal of trouble, and Sir Topham Hatt was waiting for them with important news. However long she stays, yes, sir, we'll try, sir, said the engines. Good. Daisy was not easy to please. She shuddered at the engine shed. Anything smelly is bad for my swerves. Next, they tried the carriage shed. Percy and Toby had to take them away. The engines woke next morning feeling exhausted. Daisy, on the other hand, felt bright and cheerful. Woo, woo, she tooted as she came out of the yard and back to the station. Pulled to her and was most indignant. One day, Toby brought Henrietta to the station where Percy was grumpily shunting. "Hello, Percy. I see Daisy's left the milk behind again." "Tell you what," replied Toby, "I'll take the milk. You fetch my freight cars." The drivers and station master agreed. Next day, Sir Topham Hatt arrived. Toby and Daisy had helped to clear the wreckage, but Percy remained on his perch of freight cars. "What Toby doesn't know about branch line problems isn't worth knowing. Our Toby's an experienced engine." And Percy was sent to be mended. All are now friends, and Toby has taught Daisy a great deal. She shooed a cow off the line the other day all by herself. That shows you, doesn't it? "Percy, what are you talking about?" "The ghost train. Driver saw it last night." "Where?" asked Thomas and Toby. "He didn't say." Percy's driver explained what had happened. "People will think he's a ghost." Toby promised to help. Thomas was being oiled up for his evening train. "Percy's had an accident," cried Toby. "They've cleared the line for you, but there's something worse." "I've just seen something," said Toby. It looked like Percy's ghost. It said it was coming here to warn us." No, not by the smoke on my chimney, chim. It was morning when Thomas returned. "Where have you been?" asked Toby. "Oh, sorry, can't stop. Gotta see a coach about a train." He had heard everything. Well, what do you know about that?" "Anyone would think," chuckled Toby, "that our Thomas had just seen a ghost." Toby then takes them to the hills for the farmers to feed their stock. It was no good. Thomas told Toby all about it. Instead of talking about sensible things like playing ghosts, he made jokes about woolly bear caterpillars and other creatures which crawl about in hay. They laughed a lot, but Percy thought they were really being very silly indeed. 1, 2, 3! Suddenly, like magic, the station was flooded with occasion possible. Percy and Toby smiled. "It's no fun getting stuck in the snow," whispered Thomas to Percy, "but it was worth it for this party." "You know, little Toby," he boasted, "never late, always on time. That's me." "Says you," replied Toby. Just then Sir Topham Hatt arrived. "Can I take Henrietta, sir?" Toby saw Percy by the water tower. "Don't worry, Toby. I'll take care of Henrietta until you get back." He clanked as he trundled along. He's a little engine with small wheels. His tanks don't hold much water. He had come a long way and began to feel thirsty. Toby was enjoying his drink when the signalman came up. He had never seen Toby before. Hurrying used a lot of water, and his tanks were soon empty. Poor Toby was out of steam and stranded on the main line. Then he saw Percy and Henrietta. Henrietta felt much better. He came up behind Toby and gave him a bump. "Get on, you!" James had to work very hard. When he reached the workstation, he felt exhausted. "Never mind, James," whispered Toby. "They're only joking." Toby just smiled. It was an important day in the yard. A special visitor had arrived and was now the center of attention. A celebrity is a very famous... Later that night, enjoyed talking to the other engines till long after the stars came out. But all the engines were there waiting. Duck pulled the heavy freight cars wherever they were needed. "Don't worry," whistled Toby. "The station's nearly finished." And on time, too. The engines were busy for the rest of the day, and nothing more was said. Not even a quack. The other engines enjoyed teasing Donald about her. He brought some new trees to be planted. The engines were resting in the shed. "It's the wind blowing outside our shed," replied Toby. "But I've never heard it like this before." All the engines laughed. Took them to the timber mill where they would be turned into furniture and other things. Part of his forest. "Oh dear," sighed Toby to Thomas. "I wish there was something we could do to make things better again." "Yes, indeed," replied Thomas. "But what?" "I'm sad about the trees," said Toby. "And so is Henry. The forest is a special place to him. Now some of it is gone." "I have an important job for you, Toby. Freight cars to the forest. Young trees all ready for planting." "This is the best job I've ever had," said Toby happily. This made Toby cross. "Freight cars," he grumbled, "should be where you want them, when you want them." And flounced away. At last, Toby lost patience. "I can't waste time playing hunt the cars with you. Take them yourself." Mavis was pleased. Toby stops before reaching the lane. His fireman halts the traffic at the crossing, and then he sets off again. Cars to push him along, he has no trouble with the frosty rails in the lane and across the road. Toby warned Mavis and told her just what to do. Toby was in the yard when he heard the news. "I warned her," he fumed, "and she can manage her cars herself." Yes," said Toby thoughtfully. He and his driver agreed that it would be best to help Mavis after all. "Having trouble, Mavis?" chortled Toby. "I am surprised." "Gosh!" With much puffing and wheel slip, Toby pushed Mavis and the freight cars back. The hard work made his fire burn fiercely. "Goodbye," called Toby. "You'll manage now, I expect." Mavis didn't answer. But while Mavis was away, Toby arrived. He decided to shunt the cars himself. The cars decided to bump him anyway. They reached the level crossing and Toby's brakes came on. This was the signal for the freight cars. Toby was away, with the cars screaming and yelling behind him. "Stop! Stop!" cried Toby. His driver fought for control. They came nearer and nearer to the bridge. The driver braked hard. Toby stopped, still on the rails. Then she helped Toby to safety. "I'm sorry about the cars," said Mavis. "I can't think how you managed to stop them in time." "Oh, well," said Toby, "my driver told me about circus people who walk tightropes, but I just didn't fancy doing it myself." Just then, Toby arrived with Henrietta. "We've brought lots of hot drinks and food for the villagers," he whistled. That night, all the engines had gone back to the sheds except Toby. The villagers had made a plan to thank the engines, and then they set off through the moonlit countryside. And silently into the yard. He had no idea what the villagers were going to do, but he knew it was going to be a big surprise. The engines found it hard to sleep. "What we need," suggested Toby, "is to listen to a story." It was a beautiful night on the island of Sodor. The day's work was done, and the engines puffed safely home. "But please remind us of the story so far." "Yes, indeed," agreed the engines, "especially the happy ending." And soon, they were all asleep, too. The other engines were still dozing, but that means I'll be late. The coaches will be waiting, and the passengers will get cross. Duke? Stuttered Toby. "You mean our hero?" It was his first visit to their railway, and he was having a splendid time. "Your line has got everything. It's long enough to give you a good run, so you need plenty of cars. Cars are fun." Thomas and Toby were speechless. Toby the tram engine has cowcatchers and side plates. They help to prevent animals from getting hurt if they should stray onto the line. Daisy thought Toby's fenders were silly. "I'm not," huffed Toby. "Yes, you are. I don't have stupid cowcatchers." "But they don't," said Toby. "Even bulls?" Daisy had never met a bull, but she purred away quite unconcerned. Toby was bemused and amused to see her back in the station so soon. "Bulls always run if you toot and look them in the eye, eh, Daisy?" "Ah, well," continued Toby, "we can live and learn. I'd better chase him away for you, I suppose." He clanked away to find Champion. Toby's bell rang and his whistle sounded, but Champion took no notice. Then Toby whooshed loudly. Toby whooshed a little more. And now, breakfast over, Percy was glad to see him. "Yes, I am. Why?" Toby looked up at the sky. "Where?" "Not up there. Down here," laughed Thomas. "How can something be up when it's down?" Thomas was too excited to explain. "Very splendid indeed," admired Toby. "What is this about?" asked Thomas. "Hooray! Hooray!" the engines whistled. The engines waited at the junction. Toby and Percy were each on a truck, and Duck had pushed them into place behind Edward. "Look out, big city! Here we come!" And the cavalcade puffed away. Later in the big city, all the engines were lined up in a splendid... Everywhere they looked, they saw paint pots and painters. The engines wondered who would pull the royal train. The engines worked hard, bringing people to the town. "Beep, beep," whistled Toby and Percy. But Toby and Percy didn't care. "3 cheers for the Queen!" "Beep, beep," whistled the engines. Then to Edward, felt prouder than those on Sir Topham Hatt's railway. Toby the tram engine was very excited. He was wearing a brand new bell that shone like gold. He was off to the seaside. His driver was explaining everything as they puffed along the line.
There's a seaside village near here. This year, Toby, you're the special attraction. Thank you, sir, said Toby. But what does a special attraction do? Oh, just smiles and blows whistles at everyone, replied his driver. We're almost there. Listen, you can hear the seagulls. Soon they reached the little station by the village. But instead of a big welcome, there was just one man. They've run out of room in the parade and don't need a special attraction after all. So am I, sighed Toby. What are you doing back so soon? Before Toby could reply, Sir Topham had arrived. Who's Bulstrode? Wondered Percy. He was still surprised about Toby, and now he had two puzzles to sort out. His driver explained. Well, we've both had some seaside surprises today, laughed Toby. But driver says that I'm a special attraction anyway, and so are you. Every time we go on our own line. Well, all we have to do is smile and blow whistles at everyone.
Oh, said Toby innocently. That's why you once needed bootlaces, to be ready, I suppose.